Let's begin with the book of Lamentations, written by Yahweh. Um, these are songs, but not of praise or thanksgiving, but of lamentation, Eicha, because of all that was seen by the prophet, that he lamented for the pain that would come to the people. So, chapter 1 of Lamentations, Eicha. How she sits, the city once great with people, like a widow she has become. One great among the nations, a princess among provinces, has become a slave. Right? Pretty much speaking about Jerusalem, how even now is in the hands of her masters. Interesting that we were just talking about slaves and masters, and how many people claim or think they are free, yet they are slaves. And those who are truly free are those who become slaves to the truth, slaves to justice, righteousness. The fact that it talks about she in the spiritual is talking about a spirit. And in that case, it will refer to what we have spoken in other studies about the spirit of wisdom, which separated from the truth and therefore fell and became a slave of others, pretty much entities, evil entities. In the literal, it refers to a city, even a people. Remember that a congregation of people are represented by a female, an individual as a male, just like the body has several parts, yet the head is one. So the head is the male, the body female. How she sits, the city once great with people. The city once great with people, like a widow she has become. Interesting that Mashiach came as the husband, as the bridegroom, and they killed him. There are a couple ways in which we can see that, in the sense that Mashiach is the husband, they killed him, so she became a widow by killing Mashiach. Another way of seeing it is that the people, when it comes to the flesh, they marry the enemy because of the letter. Through the letter, they married the wrong one. So they ended up as a widow once Mashiach came and through his death killed Satan. One great among the nations, a princess among provinces, has become a slave. No matter how special Jerusalem is to the Most High, because of the enemy and the people that control it, it has become a slave. They are using it nowadays for their own purpose. Those who claim to be Yahudim yet are not, but the synagogue of Satan, as Revelation 2:9 and Revelation 3:9 says. She weeps bitterly at night. Her tears are upon her cheeks. Among all her lovers, there is no comforter for her. Among all her lovers, there is no comforter for her. Just like all who claim to love her, but are just using her. The Vatican, the Jewish people, the Muslims, and that in the physical sense of people, but in the spiritual sense, all the fallen angels, idols, demons. Among all her lovers, there is no comforter for her. Remember that the Ruach HaKodesh is the true comforter. That's why Mashiach came to bring that comfort that no other spirit can give. Among all her lovers, there is no comforter for her. That's why Mashiach, who is the true lover in the sense of the bridegroom, is who brought comfort through the forgiveness of sins. All her friends have betrayed her. They have become her enemies. All who claim to love her are actually destroying it. Yehudah has gone into exile. Yehudah has gone into exile. Remember what we see in Matthew 24, Luke 17, Mark 13, when Yahushua says, when you see the abomination, the place where it should not be, those who are in Yahudah flee to the mountains. That is something that, in a way, happened in the year 70, and something that will happen when the abomination of desolation manifests, when the second Exodus will happen. Yahudah has gone into exile because of affliction and because of harsh labor. Because of affliction and because of harsh labor. This is interesting because that kind of shows how, I always mention that we need to fulfill the commandments with happiness. We should be happy to fulfill the commandments. If we don't have joy, then we're doing nothing. Even if we fulfill the commandment, we won't receive anything for it. If we're talking about reward, we need to be happy about what we do for the Father. If we are affliction, that is pretty much being in a spiritual exile. To be happy to serve Yahweh is as being in the set apart land. That's how the spirit, the soul will feel. So why did it go into exile? Because of affliction and harsh labor. Just like sin enslaves. So he who is a slave to sin is in exile because of the harsh labor, just like when Israel was in Egypt as slaves. She has dwelt among nations. She has found no rest. Obviously. First of all, because the Shabbat hasn't come, right? The millennium hasn't started. That is the day of rest. But mainly because they rejected Mashiach, who is the only one who can give us rest and allow us to enter the rest, the Shabbat. And even feel some of the Shabbat while we are in this time. She has found no rest. All her pursuers have overtaken her between narrow places. The ways to Sion mourn, for no one comes to the appointed times. The Moedim. Remember that there are 3 feasts, Moedim, that Yahweh tells us that we should go to Jerusalem. So we should visit Jerusalem 3 times a year if we are able. Obviously, exile, lack of money, and a bunch of other things make it very difficult, and Yahweh understands that. But when it comes to if everything was perfect, we, as the people of Yahweh, should go to Jerusalem during Matzot, Shavuot, and Sukkot, 3 feasts that are very important. As it is saying here, the ways to Sion mourn, for no one comes to the appointed times. No one goes when they should go for several reasons, because the enemy has made it almost impossible for those who would want to serve Yahweh. Also because of false doctrines, false commandments, false ways of fulfilling the feasts. The ways to Sion mourn, for no one comes to the appointed times. All her gates are deserted. Her priests sigh. Her maidens are afflicted, and she has bitterness. Marla. Mar, as in the bitterness that is for her. Then it says, her adversaries have become chief. Right? Pretty much the adversaries of Jerusalem are ruling Jerusalem. Her enemies have become at ease, for Yahweh has afflicted her because of her many transgressions. Her children have gone into captivity before the enemy, and all the splendor has departed from the daughter of Sion. This is very sad and very true. If you have the chance to go, you see how there's no more splendor, at least the one that we read in scriptures, because of the actions of the people. Her rulers have become like buck. They have found no pasture, right? They have found no pasture. There is no true teaching over there anymore. There is no Torah, sadly. No matter how much letter there may be, there is no true instruction. And they go powerless before the pursuer. The true Israelim, right? I want to make that clear. For Israel as a nation nowadays, the state of Israel has a lot of power when it comes to its army and the way it protects itself and all of that. But they are not Yahudim. In the days of her affliction and wandering, Jerusalem remembered all her precious matters. In the days of her affliction, which in a way is the reason why Yahweh allowed it, so that Jerusalem would get to remember. Sadly, as they say, that you don't know what you have until you lose it, Jerusalem didn't recognize the blessings that it had until it lost them. Just like we all do. But thankfully, Yahweh will rectify, will restore. In the days of her affliction and wandering, right, during the exile that we've been through for hundreds of years, Jerusalem remembered all her precious matters. Thankfully, we are starting to remember that which is truly precious for the Ruach, so that we may be able to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild it. Well, in fact, I say rebuild it in the sense of the 1,000 years, but at the end, Yahweh will bring the new Jerusalem, which he made in the heavens. She had in the days of, in the days of her affliction and wandering, Jerusalem remembered all her precious matters she had in the days of old, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy. Right? This, just so you guys know, also remember spoken about Yirmiyahu, he speaks about the exile to Babylon. So it all has to do when it comes to the historical sense with the exile when Nebuchadnezzar entered and took everything from the temple even and took it to Babylon. And the people of Israel were in Babylon for 70 years until Daniel came. And then we have the book of Daniel. When Daniel saw the book of Yirmiyahu, he realized that the redemption was close. So just like we nowadays read the prophets and we can see that the redemption is close, just like it was in the time of Daniel. So that's why Daniel, who was in the time when Cyrus entered and conquered Babylon for the fulfillment of Isaiah and other parts of scriptures, it is like our time when Yahweh is about to conquer Babel, the confusion of the world. And since Yirmiyahu prophesied 70 years in Babylon, Daniel prophesied 70 weeks, which is the 70 weeks of the chapter 9. The 69th week was fulfilled already with Mashiach's death. So there's only 1 week to go, and those 7 years, that week of years, are the last 7 years that we mention all the time. That is the time in which the end must fulfill, when the two witnesses begin their teaching for 1,260 days, the first half of the last 7. So when her people fell into the hand of the enemy, it's talking about Babylon, but remember, Babylon means confusion. The book of Revelation speaks about the great whore of Babylon. So it's also important because some people say that Jerusalem is the great whore of Babylon. But this chapter is talking about Jerusalem, how it fell in the hands of the enemy. And what's the enemy? Babylon. So Jerusalem is a slave of Babel, the great whore of Babel, as I mentioned earlier with other words. Because we fell in confusion when it comes to doctrine, the instruction, the scriptures. That's why the apostasy. And that is why also in the book of Revelations, we see about the great whore of Babylon falling. And on Revelation 11, we see that Jerusalem, earthly Jerusalem, is Egypt and Sodom, spiritually speaking. And according to Peter, the great whore of Babylon is Rome. So just like the people fell under the power of Babylon back in the day, now after Mashiach, they fell under the power of Rome until the end. Like Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babel, saw with the statue that the legs of the statue were made of iron, which represents Rome, and went all the way to the feet, mixed with clay, which is the government of the end times. So, when her people fell into the hand of the enemy with no one to help her, the adversary saw her. They mocked at her destruction. Jerusalem has sinned greatly. Therefore, she has become defiled. All who esteemed her despised her because they have seen her nakedness. She herself has sighed and turned away. Her uncleanness is in her skirts, right? It is talking about the idolatry, which is compared to the cloth that females would use when they had their period. That uncleanness represents idolatry. Jerusalem and those within Jerusalem fell in idolatry. And that's why it's saying all this. Jerusalem has sinned greatly, therefore she has become defiled. All who esteemed her despised her because they have seen her nakedness. Like I was saying, she became a slave to the whore. Just like I have mentioned regarding, for instance, Catholics and Christians. If Catholics are the great whore, then Christianity, sadly, would be one of her children, because they are a bit different, but they still have connections. All who esteem her despise her because they have seen her nakedness. She herself has sighed and turned away. Her uncleanness is in her skirts. She did not keep in mind her latter end, and has gone down appallingly. There was no one to comfort her. See, O Yahweh, my affliction, for the enemy has made himself great. Has made himself great. Yahweh won't make him great. He will use the enemy will use the people to make him great. And also the fact that it is this way kind of shows that it is all an illusion that he's creating, like the Wizard of Oz. The adversary has spread his hand over all her precious matters. Indeed, she has seen. The nations have entered her set apart place. The nations have entered her set apart place, right? Like as in the temple. When it comes to seeing Jerusalem as a female, obviously we'll be talking about sexual relations, right? The nations have entered her set apart place. And when it comes to the end times, it refers to when the nations will tread on their foot the set apart place for 1,260 days, for 42 months, as it is written in Revelation 11. The nations have entered her set apart place, those whom you have commanded not to enter your assembly. Those whom you have commanded not to enter your assembly, those who couldn't enter the temple, those who were not allowed to enter the congregation, will enter when the enemy gets the power that he wants, when the beast is ruling. All her people are sighing, seeking bread. They have given their precious matters for food to bring back life. See, O Yahweh, and look, for I have become despised. Remember how they are making the coming famine, they're making it happen. They are destroying food factories, where they keep the food, and the places where they are growing food, they are destroying all of that. They are paying some for them to destroy themselves. And that will bring the famine prophesied in the third seal. So this will happen, sadly. It is starting to happen. And also, it is the reason why Israel bought wheat for 7 years, bought enough wheat for 7 years, which goes along with the last 7 years that I mentioned, the last week of Daniel, and also with the 7 years of the skinny cows that Joseph interpreted for the Pharaoh. All her people are sighing, seeking bread. They have given their precious matters for food to bring back life. See, O Yahweh, and look, for I have become despised. Is it not to you? Is it not to you, all you who pass by? Look and see if there is any pain like my pain, which has been brought on me, which Yahweh has inflicted on me in the day of his burning displeasure. And this is coming. What has happened in the past has been only parallels of the end, have only been images of what will manifest in the end, when he will pour all his burning displeasure once and for all in the end, which Yahweh has inflicted on me in the day of his burning displeasure. From above, he has sent fire into my bones. As we know, eventually that will happen literally. Well, in the sense that from the sun, it will heat up and start burning people. So from above, from the heavens, he has sent fire into my bones, and it overpowered them. He has spread a net for my feet and turned me back. He has laid me waste and faint all the day. The feet represent the end times, and also the good news. Interesting that he spread a net, and as we know, Mashiach came and said that he will make the disciples fishers of men. And the two witnesses come as, well, we could say disciples or feet. And Mashiach will spread the net when it comes to the good news, so that they turn back, right? So I know obviously this can be seen as negative with the rest, but I find it interesting that in the end times, Yahweh will bring two people as the 2 feet, and he will spread the net, meaning as in the doctrine, so they are turned back to the truth. From above, he has sent fire into my bones, and it overpowered them. He has spread a net for my feet and turned me back, and he has laid me waste and faint all day. The yoke of my transgressions, the yoke of my transgressions has been bound by his hand, woven together and thrust upon my neck. He has made my strength stumble. Yahweh has given me into hands which I am unable to withstand. The yoke of my transgressions has been bound by his hand. Yahushua is the arm, his mercy. The last is the hand, that is justice. That's why it mentions this here. The last comes to put the yoke of the transgressions of the world as the hand of the Most High. The yoke of my transgression has been bound by his hand, woven together and thrust upon my neck. He has made my strength stumble. The enemy and those who are against Yahweh don't understand that whatever strength they have to do what they do comes from Yahweh. Everything that they have, which they find useful in order to do whatever they do, anything good that they experience, truly good, of course, comes from the Father. Yet they don't see that. They don't recognize it. They think it comes from themselves, from their own power. So they will lose that strength, and then they will realize once they stumble. Woven together and thrust upon my neck, he has made my strength stumble. Yahweh has given me into hands which I am unable to withstand. Yahweh has trodden down all my strong men in my midst. He has called an appointed time against me to crush my young men. Yahweh has trodden down, as in a winepress, the maiden daughter of Yahudah. Interesting for several reasons. One, Yahweh has trodden down all my strong men in my midst. He has called an appointed time. It was Babylon who did it when it comes to the physical. Babylon entered, destroyed, but the only reason why Babylon was able to do that was because Yahweh took the strength of Jerusalem, because Yahweh allowed Babylon to do it. He used Babylon in order to bring judgment upon Jerusalem. But Jerusalem, the Ruach, through the prophet, understands that it was Yahweh, not Babylon. So whatever happens to us, we should understand it is according to the will of the Father, because otherwise it wouldn't have happened. So we need to understand, if we don't understand anything else, we need to understand that all things are for the good of those who love Yahweh, and therefore be content with knowing that, even if we don't know why we're going through what we're going through. Knowing that it is his will, and hopefully if it is pain we're feeling, he'll give us strength and help us to stop the pain. So Yahweh has thrown down all my strong men in my midst. He has called an appointed time against me, a moed, which means that the time in which judgment will happen is during a moed. As Yahweh promised, during the feasts, he will manifest several things. He has called a moed, or appointed time, against me to crush my young men. Yahweh has trodden down as in a winepress. Remember that the last, who is the hand of Yahweh, mentioned here his hand, the last is the one who will be going to the winepress of the wrath of Yahweh, where the many are thrown. The many who are descendants of the chosen, as it is written in Revelation 12. So, well, I'll just read. Let me go to Isaiah first, Isaiah 63. And it says, who is this coming from Edom? So Isaiah doesn't recognize him because he's coming from a Gentile nation, an enemy nation, in fact. Who is this coming from Edom with garments of glowing colors from Bosra, who is robed in splendor, striding forward in the greatness of his strength? So he comes like a king, but Isaiah doesn't recognize him because he comes as an Edomite or Roman, as a Gentile. So that's referring to Yahweh coming as the last. For as the first, he came for his people, through his people, in his land, etc. So Isaiah doesn't recognize him, so he asks, and then Yahweh answers, it is I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is there red on your raiment, and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? And then he says, I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me. And I trod them down in my displeasure, and I trampled them in my wrath. Their blood sprinkled upon my garments, and I have defiled all my raiment. For a day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed has come. The day of vengeance is in my heart. The last brings vengeance. The first brought forgiveness. And then this verse, which I love, and I looked, but there was none helping, and I was astonished that there was none upholding. So my own arm saved for me, and my wrath upheld me. Like I said, Yahushua is the arm. So here, Yahweh, coming as the hand, is saying that no one could save him. The only one was his own arm, meaning himself 2,000 years ago. Yahweh comes as the prodigal son in the end times, and he's saved by the work of the first 2,000 years ago, his arm. So this confirms, well, much more, but the fact that this chapter refers to the second manifestation of Yahweh on this earth when he comes to put the enemies of Mashiach as his footstool, as Psalm 110 says, 110 verse 1. In Revelation 12, we see that at the very end, after the chosen few who are the virgin, the congregation, the woman flees to the mountains during the second Exodus, and the beast cannot do anything about it. The beast will go after the many, because the beast won't be able to destroy the few, so the beast will go after the many. And then he says, and the dragon, in this case, Satan, was enraged with the woman, the chosen few. And he went to fight with the remnant of her seed, those guarding the commands of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yahushua HaMashiach, those who have justification because they believe in their hearts that Yahushua is the Messiah. And they obviously fulfill the commandments in the sense that they love their neighbor as themselves. But it doesn't say anything about the name of Mashiach, for the name of Mashiach was given to the woman. So since the woman had the name, she was saved, because the name of Mashiach is the only name given to men under heaven by which they can be saved. So since they did not have the name, the dragon was able to go after them. And that's why after, scripture tells us that blessed are those who die, starting from the time of the seventh trumpet. Those many are the ones who in chapter 14, when the harvest happens, are thrown in the winepress of the wrath that we were just mentioning. And the messenger thrust his sickle into the earth and gathered the vine of the earth and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of Yahweh. And the winepress was trodden outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the bridles of the horses for about 1,600 stadia. So going back to Lamentations. Against me to crush my young men, Yahweh has trodden down as in a winepress the maiden daughter of Yahudah. The fact that it says daughter doesn't say as in the woman, but the seed. This is why I weep. My eye is running down with water. Interesting that doesn't say my eyes, but my eye, as in the spiritual eye, the eye of the mind. Because the comforter who could bring back my life has been far from me. My children are stunned, for the enemy has prevailed. Sion spreads out her hands. There is no comforter for her. Yahweh has commanded concerning Yaakov, his neighbors are his adversaries. Look how it says Yaakov, which represents the many. His neighbors are his adversaries, those who do not have the name, as in Yaakov before he received the name Israel. Jerusalem has become an uncleanness among them. Yahweh is righteous, for I rebelled against his mouth. Hear now, all peoples, and see my pain. My maidens and my young men have gone into captivity. I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and my elders breathed their last in the city while they sought food to bring back their life. So I called for my lovers, but they deceived me. My priests and my elders breathed their last in their city while they sought food to bring back their life. See, O Yahweh, that I am in distress. My inward parts are boiling up. Well, remember this, while they sought food to bring back their life. Sadly, once again, it connects with the time that is coming, the third seal. And that is the famine prophesied by Amos, who also mentioned how the famine will be mainly spiritual. So spiritual food, they will lack. That's why only Mashiach, who is the heavenly bread, will give us life, in this case, eternal. See, O Yahweh, that I am in distress. My inward parts are boiling up. My heart is overturned within me, for I have been very rebellious. From without the sword has bereaved. At home, it is like death. At home, it is like death. They have heard that I sighed with no one to comfort me. All my enemies have heard of my calamity. They have rejoiced that you have done it. You shall bring on the day that you have announced, so let them become like me. Right? Because Israel, Jerusalem, has gone through pain throughout much of history, because Yahweh has punished Israel little by little. But now he's going to deal with the nations that have punished Israel and Jerusalem. So now they will go in a few years, they will go through a punishment that Israel has gone through for thousands of years. So imagine how great that punishment will be for them during that short span of time. They have rejoiced that you have done it. You shall bring on the day that you have announced, the day of Yahweh, the millennium. You shall bring on the day that you have announced, also the day of his vengeance, which we just read in Isaiah 63, which he announced. The day of my vengeance is in my heart. You shall bring on the day that you have announced. So let them become like me, slaves in pain, shame. Let them become like me. Let all their evil come before you, and do to them as you have done to me for all my transgressions. For my sighs are many and my heart is faint. So Yahweh will do to all the wicked who did evil to us as they did to us, and in certain cases even worse, obviously according to justice and righteousness. And I mean worse because it is what they deserve. So that's how that chapter ends.